North Korea has managed again to thrust itself into the news. There are two items that are worth mentioning. One is the Army Chief of Staff was summarily executed, allegedly for stirring up trouble. Well, it's very hard to know just what lies behind that. It reminds me of those years ago that were criminologists trying to swirl the tea leaves and chicken entrails to figure out what in the world the Politburo was thinking about. When we face something like that with Korea, it's such a closed society, it's such a semi-nutcase. What it does illustrate, my guess, is that this general probably presented some threat to the regime, and they made up some half-baked charges to execute him. The second item is of more momentous occasion, and that is North Korea recently launched an ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile. Well, that violates a number of international sanctions that have been put in place regarding North Korea. That evidently they're trying to develop the technology to directly threaten Japan, for sure, let alone South Korea, and perhaps eventually beyond that to even including the United States. Well, North Korea knows that if they do such things, there's going to be increased sanctions, yet they do it anyway, which suggests that they have very little understanding of how they're perceived, or maybe they just don't care. At any rate, they launched one. South Korea responded with sanctions against North Korea. And in particular, South Korea and North Korea had an existing plant that straddled the border where it was a joint project. North Koreans were there, South Koreans were there working together to produce goods and services for the benefit of all. One of the very few existing programs. Well, South Korea announced that in retaliation for this missile launch, which they assume, or probably rightly so, is a threat against themselves, that they would cut off water and supplies to this plant in reply to what North Korea. And what happens then, of course, is escalation. And North Korea responds by sending in their military to take over the whole plant. Well, what's going to happen to the 280 South Korean workers there? The fear was, of course, that they were going to wind up being kidnapped, used for ransom, but they were released, but only with the clothes on their back. That was it. The North Koreans grabbed everything else they could grab. And that South Korea has shut down all communication networks with North Korea. It has shut down the two communication links that had been in place. It has shut down anything connected with this plant. So North Korea is left with a hulk of a plant that was doing their own people some good, but now won't. Their folks don't have the technology and expertise to be able to maintain it. So what next? It's very hard to tell where this is going to go from here, because North Korea is not known for its predictability. But my guess is they're not going to use military force because they can't possibly succeed by doing so. They're going to have to accept this, but this is a tragedy. Here was a plant that really was intended as a joint means of working together. Reminds me of when Israel vacated Gaza, but left their fruit and vegetable gardens in place, which would have been sufficient to help feed the population of Gaza. But instead, Hamas allowed all of that infrastructure to be utterly destroyed to the detriment of their people. The desire to be victims in the world's eyes was stronger than being able to take care of their own people. You have a very similar thing here in North Korea. And I suspect we've not heard the end of this.